Hi, it's Tiffany Lorraine, the Resilient Mother with the Resilient Mother podcast. I have a very special episode today on I Can, having a resilient attitude with none other than Dan Cockerell of Cockerell Consulting. The thing that we both have in common is we both worked for Disney. I as an intern and him for many years in many different positions. I'll let him tell you more about that. Welcome, Dan Cockerell.
Yeah, thanks, Tiffany. Very excited to be here today. Like you said, we have in common. We both worked at Disney. Even more importantly to me is we both lived at Vista Way, which was
Yeah.
and actually they just shut it down last year
Oh,
after and they're I don't know if they're going to knock the buildings down and rebuild something there, but there's been a lot of history there. There's been thousands and thousands of college students who've gone through that facility working at Disney. But yeah, my story I worked at Disney College like you did,
yep.
and worked at the Contemporary Hotel. And when I graduated, I joined the company again. This was back in 1991, and I joined as a parking attendant. And that's why I think today we're talking about attitude is so important because, I got out of college with a political science degree and no clue. So I had to have a great attitude to create opportunities for myself. And when I went to Disney to reapply, I said, look, I got my 4-year undergrad degree from Boston University. What am I qualified to do? And they said, you should park cars at Epcot. I said, I would love to do that. And that led to a 26-year career, 19 different jobs. Worked at Disneyland Paris for 5 years, worked in theme parks, worked in resort hotels, and finished out my career at Disney as vice president of 3 of the 4 theme parks, finishing up in 2018 as the vice president of the Magic Kingdom. So I had a great journey and a great career with Disney. I learned a lot, made a lot of mistakes, had a lot of successes. And then, Valor and I decided, my wife and I, she was at Disney 16 years. We said, look, our kids are growing up, they're in college or they're starting to work and have their own lives. What do we do next? So we decided in 2018 to leave Disney and start our own company. So we are consulting now. We do workshops, we do leadership workshops, keynote speeches. I'm really excited to be calling you from Rio de Janeiro in Brazil today. Our 30th wedding anniversary is next month. So my wife decided we were going to march with the Mangueira Samba School for Carnival, which was like an unforgettable event. And the last time I went to bed at 7 a.m. was a long time ago. So I'm still recovering. But anyway, many years at Disney and almost 5 years now out of Disney and learning to be an entrepreneur. And resilience has played a big part in how we've navigated raising our kids, being married, having careers, and especially now that we're out of Disney and learning a lot about the world. Resilience and especially attitude is such an important piece. And I'm a huge fan. You and I were talking at the beginning of the podcast what topics we should tackle. Attitude for me, this is one of the secrets in life. If you can figure this out, how to attract people who have great attitudes to be around you, and how to learn how to have a great attitude, you will create so many opportunities for yourself. You're not going to know what to do, but you just got to make that decision, which is the hardest part for most people.
Absolutely. So, how would you define resilience if you were going to define it?
Yeah, so I grew up being an athlete. I was in high school. I played football, and in college, I played sports, and I've always been really athletic. And so, it's interesting to me looking back on what you do as an athlete, and somehow when we get into the work world, we forget all these things. We forget that you're supposed to hydrate, and you're supposed to get enough sleep, and you're supposed to practice and train, and you're supposed to have recovery periods, and you're supposed to be mentally prepared for competition. And so resilience is all of that. And if you look at athletes who are very successful, they're very resilient. Now they have talent, but also they have a very specific focus on it because they know they have to perform at their peak performance at a given place, at a given time, on a given date. And so they've learned how to do that. And so I think a big part of resilience is being thoughtful and planful about how you spend your time, where you spend your time, and constantly learning about how to be, physically in your best state, mentally in your best state, and have clarity on what your values are. And if you can create that clarity, it's not going to make it a lot easier, but you're going to be a lot more successful because you know what you want to be, you know how you want to feel, and that's going to you're just setting yourself up for the best success you can have.
What I'm hearing from you is resilience is being intentional with your life. It's putting intentions on the things that you do. I was a gymnast and competed for, I think, 4 years out of the 8 years I was a gymnast. And so I can relate to the discipline and the preparation and the practice that goes into having a goal and reaching for it and sustaining it. And also, we fell over and over and over and over again as part of gymnastics. It was just part of the thing. You fell off the beam, you got back up. You fell off the beam, you got back up. And eventually you didn't fall off that beam. So that's what I picture as I hear what you're talking about. And some of it had a lot to do with attitude as well, because you could get discouraged. But if you kept going and you kept trying, eventually you got there.
And I think you just hit on a key point, which we talk about attitude. You keep going, you keep trying. And this for me is a big difference with a lot of people I see in my life who are almost there. They want to do more. They want to have new opportunities. And the ones that actually do it, they're willing to put themselves out there. They're willing to take these risks to, as you say, fall off the beam every single day. If we're not putting ourselves in situations where we have to might or might not fall off the beam, then we're probably not learning enough and we're not curious enough. And, that's everything. Like I said, I've had 19 different jobs in my career. I was the eternal novice. I learned the leadership skills and I take those experiences with me, but I was always learning something new because I was always the new person. I was a new guy in food and beverage, the new guy in merchandise. I was a new guy in operations. I was the new hotel operations manager. I was the new GM because I was always looking for other opportunities and expanding and trying things. And some of that, you have to let go of your ego. You have to let go of this idea that you're not supposed to make mistakes in life and you have to always look professional and everything always has to be perfect. You got to let go of that. Now, I'm not saying you have to go out and just be sloppy and do whatever you want, but if the only way you learn is to try for the first time. That's how everyone who's became great at what they did, they tried for the first time and they fell and they came back and tried again. And if they had the natural talents instilled in them, the natural passion coupled with the work ethic to keep going back again and again, that's where you get greatness and that's where you get great success. So I think working hard is not the only thing you can do, and just doing something you're really good at isn't enough either. I think you have to combine both those things, and that's where you really get into the zone where you're good at what you do, you get great results, you work hard, but you're actually seeing forward momentum, forward progress. And I think that's where a lot of people get stalled or frustrated in their lives and career. They're trying really hard, but they're not making forward progress. And that resilience after a while burns out. So you got to be smart, not only about how hard you work, but the direction you're going. And I think if you can combine those, you're going to be in a great place.
I think what you're talking about too is that you have to keep yourself filled up. You got to make sure you're doing what lights you up and keep yourself full, because you can't give from an empty cup. And that's where often resilience, when we talk about mothers and families on the podcast, it kind of goes there, is you can give and give and give and give, but then you're drained and you're dry. Right. And you have to make sure that what you're doing as part of being resilient is making sure you're filling yourself back up, that you're practicing self-care, that you are pushing yourself to grow, but you're not pushing yourself to burn out.
Right. Yeah. And so this is where, when you come back to attitude, I can have a positive attitude. I can really focus on saying, okay, there's little things, I'm not going to let them get me down. I can choose to become frustrated with something, or I can choose just to move on. And I have to make those decisions. We all have to make those decisions every day. Are we going to let something elicit an emotional response? Now, eliciting an emotional response isn't a negative thing, but you should choose when it happens. And a lot of times we're not in control of that. And so our attitudes kind of get out of whack because, first of all, we forget to be intentional about it. And second of all, when you're not intentional about taking care of yourself, filling yourself, like we said, get enough sleep, eat the right food, have the right relationships, you make it even harder. Because it's, as my dad likes to talk about a lot of times, he says, the main reason everyone in life procrastinates and they put things off, they just don't feel good. You wake up in the morning. If you don't feel good in the morning, it's easy to put off hard things because you don't feel like dealing with them. But if you get a good night's sleep, you've had maybe you had an argument with a spouse and you've really made sure you got to the end of that argument and you came to a conclusion, so there's nothing left over the next day. You put all those pieces in place. You're just setting yourself up for a much better performance, and it's easier to have a great attitude. So this is not being a hero every day and just smiling through the hardships and just, pretending nothing's wrong. It's being positive, but also putting yourself in the right mindset and putting yourself in the right physical and the right mental state so you can be your best.
So you got to set yourself up for success is what I'm hearing, that there are things you can do in your day that are going to set you up for a better morning, for a better relationship, for better work at your job. And it's your responsibility as a resilient person to find out what those things are for you that you need to do. And it may be a little different for everybody. Like, I love music. I'm not shy of that at all, but that fixes my attitude very, very quickly. And so that's my go-to. But everybody might have something a little different that they need to go to. But the faster you can tune into something that lets you flip the attitude, the better. I think too, it's important to realize that we're human beings. We have emotions. Some of those are chemically triggered, but feelings are what we choose. That's the meaning we put on the emotions. So when we do have a negative feeling, that doesn't mean we have to become it. Oh, something's wrong with me. You're human. Right. Yeah, you're going to get frustrated. Yeah, you're going to be angry sometime. But now you get to choose. What is the action you're going to take about it? How are you going to stay intentional with what you're doing? I feel like that's real resilience, because then when something throws you off, you don't cave because of it. You go, oh, this is just part of the journey. This is just another lesson I need to learn. This is just another obstacle that I need to overcome.
Yeah. And I guess I'll build on a couple things you just said. This, and you use the word learning. Every time I get in a situation where I've fallen short of what I wanted to do, let's say I'm late for an event, or I'm not as well prepared, or I get up and do a presentation, there's a typo on the slide I'm putting up there, or I'm not, the first thing I always do, I just stop and I say, okay, let me go back in time. What could I have done different to not have the situation happen? What is it I could have done differently? And a lot of people say, well, sometimes things just happen. You can't control everything in your life. Things happen. And I say, well, I agree with you, but you can influence a lot of things. So if this attitude is this continuous improvement, I'm always looking to make things a little bit better. And instead of just being a victim and saying, well, that just happened, too bad. Well, no, maybe next time you're going to send a checklist to the event promoter and make sure they check the slides for you, or you do something differently. So you rethink all the things that you can influence and everything you can do. And I think we have much more control over things than we know, because we can be more proactive and we can learn as we go. The other thing I wanted to mention, this question of attitude, part of when Valor and I are doing our workshops and master classes, we talk about hiring, when you're hiring for companies. And there's three things that we consider that great companies look at when they hire employees. It's skills, passion, and attitude. Those are the three buckets. Now, a lot of companies, Disney's one of them, most of the positions they hire for, skills aren't important, because, if you're hiring me to work at Pirates of the Caribbean, I probably haven't done that before. So if you ask me, do you know how to operate an attraction? I'd say, no, I don't. And it's not that they're not going to hire me. They're going to train me how to do that. So skills, I think we sometimes put way more onus or more weight on skills than we should. Passion, why do you want to be here? Is this something you really want to do? That's important to understand. But by far, attitude is the thing to consider when you're hiring and when you're dealing with people in your life. And the way we define it, people that have a great attitude solve problems. They are problem solvers. Mm-hmm. People that have great attitudes, they come up to a wall, they look at it, and they decide, you know what, I'm going to go over that wall. Or, you know what, I can't go over, I'm going to go around it. Or, you know what, I have a shovel, I'm going to go under it. Or I'm going to put my head down and I'm just going to crash through it. But they come up with 8 or 9 different ways to solve the problem. And when we do interviews for companies, and we consult with companies interviewing, we always ask someone, what's a problem you had to overcome, and talk about how you dealt with it. We don't care if the candidate came up with a solution or not, but we want to hear that they thought of 5 solutions. And even if none of them were successful, we know they have the attitude, which is, I'm a problem solver. I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to excuse the fact I don't have the training, I don't have the tools, I don't have the support. I'm going to figure out a way to get this done. And those people are worth their weight in gold. So that's why I think this is a really important podcast and session you're doing here, because you can choose to be a problem solver, or you can choose to be a victim and just kind of, when something gets in your way, you can just kind of give up. And every day we have the choice to solve it and keep moving forward, or to give up. And you just you can make that decision.
That's something I really appreciated about my time at Disney. I was in the entertainment department. I was a character attendant. And if not everybody knows what that is, that meant that I was kind of the bodyguard to the characters. I made sure people got pictures and their signatures. I got thrown in all sorts of situations, which was great. I appreciated the variety. I'm that kind of person. I get bored doing the same thing every day. But I constantly had to problem solve because every area that I went to had a different problem with where can we have the line of people? Is the sun in the wrong spot? Are people going to get too hot? Is my character in the shade and different things? And of course, our characters take breaks and we get to have fun and play with that and be creative. Well, I was in one area, speaking of Pirates of the Caribbean, next to Pirates of the Caribbean, and I had Captain Hook and I had Smee, since I'm free here to talk about Disney. This area was difficult because they kept bringing college groups in for tours right next to where we were at. So it was difficult to get through the crowd. So I came up with a solution. And this is the fun about the magic and the creativity we can get into when we're resilient. So I would start chomping my hands like a crocodile and saying TikTok and ask my line to do the same thing and tell them that we had to get Captain Hook back to his crew. And so we'd scare Captain Hook so that he would run, Smee would run, the crowd would part because somebody was running, and we could get where we needed to go without having to deal with the crowd.
Yep.
And
no one trained you to do that. No one told you this is how you get through a crowd at Disney. You had to either called a manager and said, I'm stuck here, or you made a decision and said, you know what, I'm going to figure out how to do this because I'm resilient, I'm resourceful, and I'm going to figure it out because I have the right attitude. I love that.
And the right attitude is having fun with it. It was I didn't see it as an obstacle. I'm like, okay, how can I make this fun?
Right,
and I think that's the right attitude to have in a lot of situations instead of being bogged down. It's that saying that if you look at the problem and you focus on the problem, you can't find the solution. You have to be willing to be creative and open up and flexible. And then all of a sudden, all these ideas pop up. And like you said, I loved how you talked about they have to come up with at least 5 ideas because even if they're wrong, they're an idea, they're an option, they're an opportunity, they're a possibility, which opens our mind up and our attitude into the possibility of our humanity to change things and to have a great outcome.
Yep, absolutely. It's and once again, I think it's just something you need to and you use the word, I love the word intentionality. This doesn't show up randomly. If you choose that you want to have a better attitude about life, about everyday situations, you have to remind yourself and put a reminder on your phone. Tell Siri, remind me every morning at 8 a.m. to have a great attitude today. Or after I deal with a difficult situation, think about, okay, how did I react to that? Did I do the best I could? So this is not, to your point, it's not just walk around and hope it happens. You have to be intentional. And if you decide this is something you want to focus on, you got to remind yourself every day. And once you do it every day, soon you get reminded, and then it becomes a habit. And all of a sudden, it's just the way you respond to things because you've trained yourself to do that. Then you can go move up onto a different competency. It's like anything else. You can train yourself to do it, just like you can train yourself to do origami, or you can train yourself to bake a cake. You can train yourself how to be resilient, but you just got to remind yourself to have the right behaviors, the right mental behaviors, the right physical behaviors, and do those repetitively, and they'll become part of who you are.
What's a moment you remember that you had to have that attitude of I can, and it became a defining moment for you?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of them, but one I remember very clearly. I had parked cars at Epcot for 6 months out of college, and then I had an opportunity to go to France to open the parking lot because that's what I knew how to do. And I remember getting on the plane. It was January 1st, 1992, and I had been, I took Spanish in high school and college. And I'd started listening to tapes for that 6-month period before I went to France. But I remember getting on the plane and thinking to myself, okay, you can deal with this new life you're about to be thrown into 2 different ways. You can get to France, you can become very quiet, you can really close your thinking, you can be timid, you can be embarrassed and not try to speak up and learn and speak this new language, or you can treat this as an adventure. You can just, every time you get in a difficult situation, you can think about this is going to be a great story someday. And just, you can go out there and just do this. And as adults, we don't like to make mistakes. That's why learning a new language is so hard when you get older, because you're trained not to make mistakes. And people respond because you can't remember the right word, or you mispronounce a word, it means something else. And I really thought to myself, I have about a year right now. If people say, why don't you speak French? I say, well, I've never lived in France. Okay, that's reasonable. But if I'm there a year and after a year they say, why don't you speak French? I can't tell them, well, I've only been here a year. All I can say is I chose not to learn. I chose not to put myself out there. So I got to France and I just went for it. And none of my employees in the parking lot spoke English. And so we went as we went, and I listened. It's incredible when you're immersed in a different culture and you're open-minded, how fast you learn. And after a year, I could have a conversation. I could hold my own. I could manage. Now, I was there for 5 years, and no one ever asked me what part of France I was from. That's for sure. But I could communicate. And it's because I made an intentional decision not to be timid, not to be embarrassed, and just embrace this new language and figure it out. And once again, it was a choice I made. And I knew some other Americans that went over. After 2 or 3 years, they still had a lot of trouble communicating because they didn't want to come out of that protective shell. They didn't want to put themselves out there. And for me, it was a shame because they had such a great opportunity.
I think too, it's important to remember that we do have some universal languages as a human race. I learned those working at Disney too, because we had international guests a lot of the time. And that would be a smile, a hug, a handshake, laughter, music. Those are all universal.
Absolutely.
So we're not as different as we think. So we can start somewhere and we can build from there. And I have to share this because it's a funny story from Disney. But I learned a little bit of Spanish just so I wouldn't have people cut in my line, just enough to make them think I knew, because then they would go line up in my line and not give me any grief. Well, one day I'm doing this to a huge family that came up in my line. And I said a little phrase. I don't even remember it anymore. That tells you how little I knew. And they got excited because they're like, oh, she knows Spanish. They start talking fast Spanish at me, and they're all so excited. I'm like, un poquito enchilada Taco Bell. And then they burst out laughing.
But they knew you wanted them to go to the back of that line.
But they were willing to cooperate because we had such a good time. So, I mean, it's that attitude. I had a good attitude about it, and they had a good attitude about it. But it was fun to figure out how to get past some of those language barriers just by having the right attitude. It works. It's a good way to be resilient. So I've never learned a foreign language. I would really like to. And I really admire what you were able to do. That's so brave, I think, in a lot of ways. And today we're so bilingual. It's so important if you make that effort to be, I know like Circus Olay, for example, only hires if you speak 2 languages because they're such an international company themselves, for example, that it's essential. They need you to be able to communicate with everyone. And so that's an important skill.
And I'll tell you, I'm not special. I don't have any special language skills. I just chose to go to another place and be a foreigner and figure it out. And that's why I'm sitting here in Brazil today we're here for 6 weeks, figuring out how to communicate and how to do business here. And we have interpreters and translators and technology. And I don't speak Portuguese, but we figure it out. And our attitude, our smiles, our friendliness is what really differentiates us here. It's not our language skills. So it's, once again, I think life it's a big adventure, and you just got to open yourself up. And when you have, this kind of ties into something I talk about all the time. And a lot of it has to do with attitude. You create your own luck. I'm a huge believer in this. You create your own luck. And it's because when you have the right attitude, you're open-minded, you say yes. When people ask you for help, you say yes. When they're looking for a volunteer, you say yes. You opt in. Now, I'm not saying you don't be irresponsible and you just sort of say yes to everything, but you're willing to lean in and try things and do things and go places and meet people. And sometimes it's uncomfortable, sometimes it's embarrassing, but you get so many more opportunities in life, and it opens all these doors. You just have to decide that you have to be comfortable with not knowing what's going on all the time, be comfortable to not be in control, be comfortable to not be able to express yourself all the time. But if you can be that person that goes, yeah, let's go for it. I'll try that. You want to jump into that freezing cold lake? Yeah, sure. Is it going to kill me? No. Is it going to be really uncomfortable? Yes. All right, let's just give it a go. And if you can do those kind of things, once again, you train yourself to be even more open-minded, to be more curious. This attitude creates more opportunities.
And children, I think, are a really good example of that. They wouldn't learn to walk if they gave up right away. They get up over and over and over again. They're not uncomfortable in situations because they haven't learned how to be uncomfortable yet. So they're willing to do and try things that we as adults sometimes forget. It's that curiosity that we have to get back in touch with. And
Yep.
just that excitement for life and new experiences, and just
Yeah.
being grateful for the experience. This is experience that I get to have. I get to do something new. I get to learn something new, and being excited about the process of
Absolutely.
growing and learning. And what would you say to the rising generation about being resilient? I did a summit called the Resilient Mothers Summit, because we were talking about resilient mothers equal resilient next generation.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I would give advice to is don't let anyone define what success looks like for you
Mm.
except you. Now, it doesn't mean you're not going to get advice. You're not going to get counsel. You're not going to talk to your parents, your friends, your spouse, your coworkers, your mentor. You should get lots and lots of input. But at the end of the day, there's only one life, and it's your life, and nobody is right. So everyone's going to give you advice. You should take it into consideration and then follow the advice you think is the best advice and what the best path is for you, and have the confidence to do that, because so many people get influenced by social media, by other things that they think they're supposed to do. And I think this independent thinking and not going with the flow and not trying to fit in of what other people's expectations are, if you can break free of that, your happiness, I think, is going to go way up, because it's especially true with social media, where it used to be the term, you're competing with keeping up with the Joneses. Well, the Joneses were your neighbor, and you could see your neighbor. Oh, they got a nice car. They got a new car. Why don't we have a new car? We have to work harder. They just they just painted their house. Whatever it was. Well, today the Joneses are millions and millions and millions of people online that you don't even know, but somehow you're still comparing your life to theirs because it looks like they have this great life that you're missing out on. And the reality is they got as many problems or more problems you had in your life. You just don't see them because no one posts that on social media. They just post the smiling moments. Hey, I'm coming to you from Rio de Janeiro. Life is great. No, you have difficult moments. You have difficult situations. You got to work through stuff. Things are never as good as you seem they are. So I think for younger people, for resilience, get rid of that pressure of trying to prove to others who you should be and what you are, and decide for yourself. And because at the end of the day, only you can judge whether you've met your goals or not. I think that's a real important piece for younger people and older people. Be your own person, set your own goals. And once again, it doesn't mean shut yourself out from advice, but own your life.
Yes, I love that. I think resilience really is owning your life, the contribution that you're going to make in the world, and the legacy that you're going to leave. And with all the changes coming in the world today, I think some are disheartened. Some youth don't understand what their options are, when really new options are coming, new opportunities are coming. And it's just a matter of being curious enough to find your place in what the new world is going to become. And it's no different than any other generation who's overcome world wars or the Great Depression or anything else. It's just a change, which is an opportunity. And so for me, it's come on, have that attitude, and just know that you are enough. You've got the answers. You can do it. And there's something you still have to contribute, because you matter. There's no one else like you in the entire world. In the entire universe, there's only one you. You can't tell me you don't matter and you don't have something to contribute, because you do. And it's just a matter of you finding it, stepping into it, and then protecting it, and not giving a hoot what anyone else thinks to a point.
Agreed.
But you respect others, but just really step into who you are. And you'll find those are actually the people who stand out the most. Those are the people that have a following of people, because you become somebody that is aspirational, that's inspiring. And it's just from being you. It's not that complicated. Comparison is the thief of joy. Why blend in when you are meant to stand out? Own it, step into it, and claim it. So
I'm inspired.
Well, thank you. I'm working on becoming a motivational speaker. This is kind of a
well done, Tiffany. That was great.
Thank you. It's been an honor to have you on here. Is there any last thoughts that you have around having a resilient attitude you'd like to share?
I don't think so. Just really appreciate you bringing this topic forward. Hope everyone who's watched this video maybe has a new idea, or is just a little nugget, something you're going to incorporate into your life starting tomorrow. Once again, you can hear all these things and be motivated. It means nothing unless you do something differently. So you just got to change something, do something differently tomorrow as the seed to move forward and do other things differently. And if you're watching the show or listening to this show, you already know that, because you've had enough curiosity to tune in and listen. So you're already ahead of 99% of the people in the world. So keep doing it.
Awesome. Well, you can reach Dan at Cockerell Consulting if you'd like to find out more about the programs he spoke about that they're doing, and they will help you be resilient. I also do some coaching and do some group work and have workshops and things coming up. If you're interested, my link's below, so you can find us to find out more if you'd like. But for today, thank you for being here, and go out there and live your best life. And we'll see you next time.